Okay, so good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. I think it's still Thursday, with the market picking up a little bit. I really have no idea what day it is. But I appreciate everyone being here. So I want to first start off by thanking Jeff and Leslie and Sarah and Candy. The format today is we're going to do a panel discussion. Because I firmly believe in my experience that we all learn more from each other than we do from any other source in the industry. So that's why we picked some of the smart people of our group today to help us out with a panel discussion. Originally I set up with I gave everyone like 20 questions to prepare themselves for, and then at the last minute I changed it all. So sorry about that for everyone. Sorry about the curveball, but I still, from talking with people, I still get the impression that the NAR commission settlement is still kind of a concern for everyone. It's still, there's some misunderstandings and filling out the forms and what it means and how it impacts our business. So that's kind of the focus of what we're going to talk about today. And even though we've got panelists, which I thank you all for being here. Feel free to jump in if you got some comments yourself. Like I said, we learn more from each other than we do from any other source. So I'd like to have the panelists introduce themselves. So we'll start off with Candy.
Sure. I'm Candy Dykeman, and I am from the Mankato office. Been a realtor for, I don't even know anymore, 12, 13 years, something like that, but have been with Atwood for about 6, I think. I think I'm approaching my 6th year, maybe 7. Time flies. Next.
Okay, so Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself. Oh, I think you muted, Jeff.
Still muted.
Still muted.
Does anybody else hear that weird noise?
Yeah.
I hear buzzing.
Yeah.
Yes. So it's not just me this time.
No.
And for Jeff, it came off mute when he clicked off. It came off mute, but we still couldn't hear anything.
Yeah, that's weird.
Can't hear you, Jeff.
I'll jump in. I'm Sarah.
Okay, yeah, Sarah, jump in.
I work out of the Battle Lake office, Fergus Falls, Battle Lake area. 5th year in real estate.
Leslie?
I'm Leslie Flugstad, and I work primarily in the Fergus Falls area, but also steep over to the lakes when I can with Sarah, and we work together a lot. I've been in real estate for 15 years.
My turn. Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go. Hey,
okay.
way to go,
well,
Jeff.
helps if you turn this stuff on, I guess. My name's Jeff Knapp. I'm one of the new guys who came over from Century 21 Premier Group. I've been in real estate since 1999, so that's like 26 years. I'm primarily a listing agent, and I don't know, where do we describe our office now? Wayzata, St. Louis Park. We're in transition.
Yeah, it was real interesting when the Premier Group joined us, because we in the Minnetonka office, we knew that our building was going to be torn down within the near future. And then when the Premier Group came over, we found out that their office was going to be torn down. So now we're looking for a new office. We think we found one over kind of by West End in St. Louis Park, but hopefully we should be in there all together again by June 1st at the latest. So let's start off.
The creek don't rise.
So let's start off with, so in your market, your specific markets, Candy, what's your biggest challenge today?
Today, actually, like this week, I should say, since the tariffs, actually for me, it's been the tariffs part of it. I don't know if we want to go down that road, or if you're just mainly talking about the NAR commission. I don't really have anything with the NAR commission, to be honest. Nope. Yeah. But if you're just talking in general.
I'm
it's the
talking in
tariff
general.
stuff.
I'm talking
Okay,
just in very
I've had
general terms.
probably 3 people that have wanted to, like, I've been nurturing them since like November, December, that are, yep, I'm gonna be selling my house in the springtime. Well, guess what? Now it's spring, and I've, now 2 of them I got together maybe 2 weeks ago, and they were ready to write. Like, I literally have the paperwork in a folder. We were gonna be listing the house. We were writing an offer on a house. And then the tariff things happened, and they called me and they're like, nope, we are just holding tight. And believe it or not, that happened with 3 sellers who were going to be buying. And I'm not a news person, to be honest. Like, I'm just like, whatever, okay. Milk's going to go up, gas is going to go up. Okay. They have cash. All of them are cash buyers. They're sitting in a good position, but they just don't want to take their money out of, the retirement funds, or they want to hang on to their cash. And yeah,
Sure.
so I was just sitting tight, but believe it or not, 2 of them called me back like literally 3 days later. Okay. Yeah, I guess I will. So I think they just kind of got freaked out at first. It's
Yay.
kind of settling in, but I think in the long run, we're going to be okay. Yes. I was just watching, I don't know if anybody else watched the Tom Ferry and Keeping Current Matters video. I just saw it this morning, but I think it actually got posted 7 days ago. And they had I have to rewatch it because they had some really good information and screens to share about how to handle it and not alarm people. Just like everything, it's alarming in the news. And it's our job to kind of keep people not alarmed and keep them calm.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Yeah, I know.
So Leslie, what kind of challenges do you have in your specific market, or you in Sarah's?
I mean, there's some of that here in terms of a little bit of concern, but I also know, or I guess from past experience, when there's been these market dips, it's really been a great time for me to keep pushing the narrative that strong investments are smart money is going into property right now. And so I guess I'm focused on that. I don't know, Sarah, you want to chime in? For locally, I feel like people are carrying on. We are dependent on a lot of farmers here for lakeshore purchases, and I am a little concerned where that may go. But I feel like our currently things are really strong here. There's an acceptance of the interest rate for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think within 2 or 3 weeks, it's going to be booming for this specific county. We're heavy on the lakes. We have over 1,000 lakes in our one county. So it's only a matter of time before the lake buyers really start coming out here. Could use a little more inventory. What surprise. That's
Well,
how
if they
we-
want to be in Mankato, I have a couple. On the lake.
Oh,
Send them my way.
on the lake, yeah.
Jeff, how about you?
I think inventory is a large problem, and the complete instability. I mean, people ask me what's going to happen. I said, I have absolutely no idea. We saw interest rates blip down, and then take a big jump last week. So I've got some very skitterish first-time buyers who aren't exactly sure what they're getting into. And unfortunately, I'm not enough of a fortune teller to tell them what's going to be coming for them down the road. The one thing that Jim Luger, the guy who started Luger Realty where I first started, used to say is, well, people are not ready to go back living in caves. So that's about, I think, all that we can gather out of it at this point in time is, yeah, people are gonna want a house to live in, but to really define what that market's going to look like, I really don't have a clear idea.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Could I
Leslie.
expand on what Jeff said a little bit? I mean, I think too, the pandemic maybe taught us, and maybe it's the age I'm at, where it's like life does carry on. I mean, there is a lot of chaos, and maybe by design, I don't know, with everything in the news, which I also just kind of can't feast on that red meat thrown out all day. I mean, it exhausts you if you do. So I'm just kind of going to basics. Like, yes, people want a house. People want all the things they've always wanted. They're, expecting a baby, want to be in their place that has a little bit of yard. Around here, I think people, thankfully, there's still affordability for a young person starting out. That is long-term a big concern of mine, but like right now it is available, and it is, life is short, and you just try to live the way you want to live while you can. These interest rates historically aren't that bad, and I don't know. That's my take holistically. I just think you're right, Jeff. People are always going to want a house. They're always going to want the things they want, waiting for perfect timing. I think if anything, it's going to show there is no perfect timing. There's not a lot of predictability right now. So you may as well just really kind of accomplish and live where we want.
Well, Tom Ferry this morning said the world is on sale, so you should go spend money.
I'm still, I'm the other part I'm concerned about is I've heard nothing about what's happening in the new home market, whether or not new home starts are up or not. I mean, here in the Twin Cities area, we've enjoyed a couple of years of growth where new home builders have been out there in the market, creating new developments, new places to live. And I don't know, if I was in that business, would I be wanting to sink a bunch of money into a new project? I'm not so sure I would.
Right.
And what's the effect on that? That's just going to further restrict inventory, maybe take out some of our move-out buyers. So I'm at the end of my career. I'm 78 years old, so whatever happens, I'm going to survive it, because if I don't like what happens, I can just say, okay, it's time to hang it up.
Yeah. Okay. Bye-bye. See
But
you later.
but if I were a younger agent, I would be really worried. The one thing that gives me some encouragement is it seems that the opposition to all the chaos that's existing in our universe right now seems to be getting organized. So I'm hopeful that if the opposition to all the chaos can get organized, maybe we can get back on a better path. So I got my fingers crossed.
Yeah, let's hope so. Okay, so on the let's pivot over to the NAR commission settlement. So are you guys finding in your markets when you're talking with buyers and sellers, are they aware of the action? What's their take on it? What's their confusion level? I mean, are people aware of it, and how is it affecting your relationship with them? So Sarah, let's start off with you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Some of them are, some of them are not aware at all. I had somebody had said, well, we went and looked at a property with another agent and they want us to sign papers and it really felt off to us. And I said, well, I've got to tell you, that agent did it correctly. That is the way that things go now. So yep. The ones that have been shopping and it's all of a sudden like, hey, paper right away. And there's going to be times where it's, last minute where it's like, hey, can we go look at this house? They call you and you have the papers with you and you bring it and you sign it on a tailgate right before you go in the house, right? But there's going to be ones where you want to be meeting them before, whether it's at the office or Zoom, kind of explain things, how that goes. That's ideal, but it's not always going to happen that way, right? So there is going to be those times where you're going to have to meet them and try to explain everything right before. Leslie and I have talked about this before. So trying to explain to it before, I don't like that like pressure of like, hey, here's buyer's rep and yes, I'm going to be representing you and I've got about 4 minutes because this is now cutting into our showing time. So I don't love that. And it does feel like where it's like, wait, I'm supposed to sign everything now? Like, how did this change from last summer when I was looking at homes? I didn't have to sign anything. So letting them know that, yes, you gotta kind of educate them, and sometimes it feels quick and rushed, and I don't like that. Again, is it ideal to have explain it before to them? Yes, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So, so on some of those, what I've done is I just have it. You can do the touring agreement, or you can just have it exclusive to that house. you know, if they don't feel comfortable signing it, then I've had it where I said, hey, I'm just going to have it exclusive just to this property. We'll just put that on there.
Okay, Sarah, thanks for that. Sarah, also with you, you mentioned the touring agreement. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with that. Could you maybe go through what it is and how it works?
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I'm probably not the right person. Leslie, you explain that one because I think you use that one more than I do.
Yeah, I'm pretty exclusive with that with First People. This is a two-way street, right? We're in a relationship, and do you want to jump into a relationship? That's my hugest issue from the get-go with this is, do I get a say in it? I mean, we can't always assume every buyer we ever meet or somebody who calls on a sign that we have a listing for is somebody we want to be tethered to either. So, I think that also shows our strength that we're not like forcing somebody and desperate for a client right out of the gate. So as things are written right now, I for sure hate it and don't do it. I've never forced anybody to say you're going to sign a buyer agreement before you go in. It's a touring agreement and it's now commitment. And I make it very clear that way. And I've never had anybody I do buyer agreements when buyer agreements are appropriate in my relationship with this potential buyer.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
I like that, Leslie. Yeah, we don't use one in Mankato, and I wish we could and would. Because I've lost buyers because of it. They're like,
Yeah, it's
I'm not
awkward,
signing
isn't
things with
it?
you. I don't even know you. I've never met you before. Why would I work with you right away? Why would I sign this commitment? Even if I say we can do it for literally just this house, I think there's that trust factor. Like, they still don't quite believe that.
It hurts our industry as a whole.
I described it to somebody the other day and I was like, you know what, maybe this is a wrong metaphor, but it's like jumping right into marriage, like signing the paper versus like when you're, you know, for when you're touring houses with people, it's like, okay, let's go in with an agent that's just like commenting on the colors and stuff. And you've got another agent who's like looking, you know, around, explaining things to you, talking about, okay, I am seeing a little bit slope on the porch here, you know, that's a concern, but you know, not like a deal breaker, but let's just keep that in mind kind of thing. So you really get to learn agents as you date them, right? As you're touring with them. And then all of a sudden it's just like, nope, now we're just jumping right into marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a good analogy.
I've taken a little different approach. I tell buyers, you know, I want to have a relationship with you. I want to represent you because if I don't represent you, I'm representing the seller. And I have to report to the seller anything that you tell me that might be relevant to the transaction. And I don't want to be put in that position. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to insist that you sign a buyer's rep agreement if we're going to represent each other, but it's cancelable on just, you know, all you got to do is send me an email. Let me know you don't want it anymore, and we're free. That's, you know, you get a quickie divorce. But I really don't want to go and show you a house when then I'm obligated to report to the seller anything that you say to me about how, whether you like it, whether you don't like it, whether you think it's priced. And this is for your protection as much as mine. I'm more comfortable if I'm in there and I'm representing you, and all my loyalties are on your side. And I really haven't had much pushback on it. And if they do push back, I said, well, great, go find yourself somebody who'll take you in there and maybe sell you out to the seller. It's my personal way of doing things. And I'm mostly a listing agent, so. So, you know, the buyers I work with have all been kind of mostly referrals, and I want that representation agreement in place before I show them anything. I insist on it.
There's a little discussion happening in the chat about the touring agreement, and I'm referring to the North Star touring agreement, which Candy, you don't have, right?
I'm part of North Star, but our MLS doesn't have one. So we were advised not to use the touring agreement in the RASM area.
It's just much more comfortable upon first meeting here. Every market's different, and you know, if anything, if I can sort of bookend this. I mean, right at the very beginning, I remember seeing a cartoon when the settlements happened, and it was like the anointed one, this incoming king, where anybody who's a listing agent. This is benefiting them. And it's hard for the buyer's agent. It just is.
Yeah. I mean, like I had one just a couple, well, last week it was, and I explained it very thoroughly. Everything was going perfect on the phone. We got to the end where I said, okay, well, before I can actually show you the house, and then I went over the buyer's representation with them, and I says, I'll have to have you sign that. I can send it out. And before I even got finished, he's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I've never heard of this before. I just looked at a house a couple weeks ago and I didn't have to sign anything. And I just said, I can't control what other agents are doing. I told him, I said, they are not supposed to be doing that. And I said, I can send you some articles on it so that like, I'm not just making this up and trying to capture you as my, exclusive client. And he got so mad at me and just, he's like, I see, I called you because you were number one agent and blah, 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 blah. And I'm just like, well, it puts you in a really bad spot in position. And I don't know if he's lying, if he didn't sign anything. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I have no idea. Maybe he didn't look at something. I don't know. And so I reached back out to him a couple of days later, right before I left for Dallas. And he just said, no, I found an agent that will show me without signing anything. I don't know. Did he really? I have no idea. But
I'm sure they're out there.
Yeah, I can't control what other agents are doing. But I just think it does put people's guard up a little bit. And I agree with Sarah. If you can get them to come into your office, have that buyer's consult with you, and I've designed a pretty good buyer's consult little guide. And I just think that that's what you really have to try to do. But there's definitely those calls that I want to go look at this house right now. And if you won't show it to me, I'll find somebody that will. And those are the hard ones, I think. If you can get in front of somebody, you're going to already building a relationship and you can, tell them and explain more thoroughly. But when you're like running in and running out and they don't want to hear it. And yeah, I think those last minute ones are the hardest ones. Or stay in front of your sign. I want to look at it right now.
I'll tell you, I had one that somebody came up from the Twin Cities and they were looking at 4 different properties and there was 4 different brokerages. One of them was having an open house. So that's how they were able to get in with that one. But as I was standing there talking to him, he had an Alexandria agent that was had texted him. And I said, no, how are you doing this with other agents? Because you're looking at 4 different properties today. And as we were standing there, he showed me his phone and he said, here's how the other agent did it. And it's one of the top dogs over in Alexandria. And he said, hey, just wanted to let you know, since the NAR settlement statement, I just sent you the buyer's rep agreement. What I did, since we didn't know each other, is I put it exclusive for that property today. And so we were just in the middle of that conversation. I said, see, there's how that guy does it. So that was how that one did it. And then the other one, I just did it with him, I think, right at the door. And then it was me. And then the other one was an open house. So it was very interesting for me where I'm like, okay, this is very common. Somebody's coming up. They're looking at 4 lake homes up here in one day and with 4 different brokerages. How is everyone doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do write a lot of them for just that property. And like, I kind of explain it. It's like a test drive of a car. We're just going to you're going to test drive me out. I'm going to test drive you out. Let's just look at one house. And if you like how I showed you the house, my follow-up, the information I gave you, then we can extend it and we can, work long-term together. And most of those, unless they're just a one-off and they're not even going to buy a house anyways, they do transpire into a full buyer's rep.
Okay, so let's back it up just a little bit. So what I found is one of the most uncomfortable discussions or conversations is when you first meet with a buyer or a seller, and you've got to explain the NAR commission settlement. So from ground zero, because you're asking them, what do you know about this? And they're saying, I don't know anything about it. You have to explain it. Lead me through that conversation. How do you start that, and where, how do you do it?
Go ahead, Leslie.
I tell them that the start of it was in Missouri, and the state of Missouri did not have really a clear definition on paperwork as to how commission was split or how it traveled to the different brokerages. And then I say Minnesota always has had their act together and have always clearly stated how commissions are split. That's how I phrase it. There's so much confusion. I don't think there's one person who really has understood it since I've walked in the door since this has happened. I try to keep it as simple as possible. I do. I just try to keep it as simple as possible. And then I say, this is what my listing commission is. And if we're going to, I give them all the reasons why people still are in that same format, typically, where the buyer's agent also is to be paid. This is what we can expect to pay, and we cannot advertise that. So here's a couple ways that we can at least plan for it, but not necessarily we can't advertise what we're paying out. That's how I do it. And
Okay.
I don't try to get too in the weeds with it. It really is that. It is and actually it was an attorney from Minnesota, that took advantage of this loophole that Missouri had and blew it up. And people are feasted on it. There's a lot of bad press for realtors out there. And all the articles that came out a year ago were horrible too, and made some strange promises that obviously weren't going to come to fruition that anybody who had a brain would figure out. But, I just keep it that simple.
So how about the discussion now, especially with a buyer, when you're talking about, here's how I get paid, and talking about, the buyer's rep, where you you owe me so much money, but if the seller pays me, I mean, how do you have that conversation,
Well,
letting them know that they may be on the hook for your
right.
commission if there's no sharing or the seller's not paying out?
And that's why I like a little more of a longer courtship, if you will, before I am cementing anything on a buyer representation paper, because that's a pretty big pill to swallow too. And I watched somebody going into one of my listings. We were leaving as he was coming in with a buyer, and I mean, God, that poor kid was just not comfortable at what this agent was trying to say. No, I only get paid 2.5. You only have to pay me this if this. I just like a little longer relationship so I can explain that, and I can really tell them that it's going to be to your benefit ultimately, especially if we get into something competitive. And we want to keep the purchase agreement as clean as possible. And if you have earmarked the money for my commission, for my fee, then we can work it out with the lender. We can come up with a game plan, because if it's a hot property, I don't want that to drag you down. And that's the biggest flaw I see. I mean, I could go on and on, so you're going to have to cut me off, just so you know. I can go on and on about this. Got a lot of passionate feelings. Like, that's the biggest problem for the future in lawsuits, I think we'll all look at, is that somebody's going to come back on you as a buyer's agent and say, you cost me that house. I wanted that, but you got to wedge your 2.5% there on the purchase agreement or the cooperating agent agreement. So if it's going to be, and I haven't a ton of experience with this, but I've had one where it's like, let's come in clean. It was actually his idea, which was brilliant. I'm just going to pay you, Leslie. We're going to just work it out, and we're going to come in clean on this offer. I don't want any back and forth on that. And I want to not have that as a lingering feeling like maybe I didn't get this because my buyer agent commission was wedged in there. That's how I see it. I don't have a perfect script on how I'm getting the 2.5 or establishing that, but that is just something I'm going to have to keep developing, show my worth, why it's important to have that as a representation. And that will be a silver lining, maybe ultimately, as I think all of this transitions that way anyway.
So what I do when I'm sitting down and talking to buyers, I kind of, when I also, like, as soon as they start getting to it, we all should be comfortable talking about it, right? Because, we all get paid. And, I always, even say to my buyers, like, you don't go to work and not get paid, right? But my heart just starts beating as soon as you get to the, commission part. But I kind of try to explain it to them that, there's not going to be all situations where they're going to have to pay the commission. Sometimes a seller is going to be offering it. So I just kind of tell them that, before we even go look at a house, I'm going to know what that commission is, because I'm calling ahead. Is there cooperating compensation? I'm going to have that answer. And so I always tell them, so we're going to know right up front. And if you love the house and want to make an offer on it, it's going to go down a couple different ways. Either they're already offering the compensation, so we don't even have to worry about it. If they're not, we're going to write it into the offer and make it part of our negotiating. I said, but we're not going to be able to come in and lowball them and then also ask for my commission. But again, you don't go to work for free, and I don't go to work for free. I show lots of houses and never get paid. Or you're going to make a decision and say, okay, well, I can't afford to pay you. And if they're not going to take my offer at that, then you have the option to walk away, and it's not the right house for you. And that usually, again, I might say a little bit different, depends on the person, but that usually is enough clarity for people to be like, okay, so there's options. Like, just because I want this house, or just because I signed a buyer's rep for 3% doesn't mean I'm going to have to pay that. And that, I think, is a comfort level of them knowing that if I sign a buyer's rep for 3%, do I have to pay that 3%? And I think they're comfortable knowing that there's options, there's ways to decide who's going to actually pay that compensation.
Candy and Jeff, what does your guys' markets look like as far as, are a lot of them, when you're reaching out and saying, are you paying out? They saying, yep, we're at the 2.5, or do a lot of them say, just write it in, negotiable?
Well, one, I wish we were at 2.5. It's usually 2.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm sorry too. But I slowly, believe it or not, am running into more that are not offering. And I'm actually switching myself a little bit to that. I was listening to a podcast, and it just said they just feel like, you're leaving money on the table for your sellers by putting it in there. Maybe somebody's only going to ask for 2%. Maybe they're only going to ask for 1% because they really want the house. Maybe they're going to be like Leslie's situation. They're going to say, no, we'll just pay for that ourselves. So I'm kind of, my last 2 that I've signed have been at 0 commission being offered. So I know that's kind of down in our list. Yeah.
I do that all the time now. This is just, I think, the future, frankly. I prepare them. So I show them what it's going to look like and expect it. So it's not some shocker. I'm not trying to,
hide anything, but yeah.
Hook them.
Do you put it in their net sheet?
Yeah, I put it in the net sheet. I just put it in the net sheet, and I say we're not paying out commission. And I'm sorry, I don't want to dominate, but here people aren't even asking. I had one that was not planned to be an experiment, but it ended up being an experiment. I put it up. We had 8 showings, booked right away. Not one agent asked if a commission was being paid out. Not one, of 8 different agents. And
yeah,
I know
don't
that
get people calling me anymore. They used to, when it was new. Now people don't call me at all. I mean, if they're going to write an offer, they'll ask me. But they're already sitting down to write the offer. So clearly they haven't even had that conversation with their buyers yet. Like, because they don't know. They're just sitting down to write the offer at that moment. Know what I mean?
What I'm struggling with on the listing side is what commission to charge for that. Yeah. Because I feel like it's a bit of an opportunity to finally get the commission I do deserve, because believe it or not, I have always shorted myself on the listing side, and now I feel like now I finally can, and it is. So just curious what other people are doing if they do it that format.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. An agent in our office kind of, I don't know, gave me kind of some pointers a couple of years ago, and I'm like, oh my God, I could never ask for 3%. So I'm kind of with you. I feel like I'm shortchanging myself, and it's a little bit, I feel it's a little bit easier conversation, to say it's 3%, and then we just wait to see what another agent's going to ask for. They could ask for 0, they could ask for 1, 2, 3, and now it's your decision. It all depends on what the whole offer package is going to look like. Because that's what it is. It's, if you're going to get your net offer, who cares if it's 2 or 3%? Right. As long as we're still within your net.
Yeah, I think the way things are trending in the Twin Cities is there a lot of confusion to start with. But I think we're and now at this point, trending back to the way things used to be. In my listing presentations, I've been saying, I've been describing the way the system used to work. I've been describing the disruption caused by the NAR settlement. I've suggested that, although we're going through a period of confusion, that we trending back towards the normal side. The way I set up the listing agreements is we take our 6% and whatever the seller agrees to pay in the purchase agreement will be deducted up to 2.7%. One of the things to keep in mind, if you look back at this NAR settlement, who do you think came away the best financially from the whole deal?
Attorneys.
The
Attorneys.
You got it. You got it. There is, as a former attorney, I can tell you there's a whole section of the bar. They're called class action. It's the class action bar. Because our firm in DC, we had one of these guys on board. They just want to run around looking for a nice fat class action to bring. The concept is, oh, we're helping the farmers. Oh, we're helping the buyers. Oh, no, they're not. They're out there. They know how to make money. And these class action suits are very, very lucrative for the attorneys who represent the plaintiffs in the class action suit. They don't always turn out right, but when they do, you bank a couple million. So I try to explain that to both buyers and sellers when I'm working with. The only people who really won in that transaction were the attorneys who represented the plaintiffs. I said, we had a pretty good system. It was working pretty fairly. Nobody was getting hurt. I mean, for the most part, sellers were paying the buyer's broker, and the buyer really didn't care whether he was paying 2.7 or 2.5 or 2. That wasn't material to them because the seller was paying it. So, I think the trend is we're going to trend back to the way we were. It's all going to settle down pretty soon. I don't think the expectation is out there on sellers' parts that they're not going to have to pay. I said, it's just not heading that direction because buyers agents are going to want to get paid, and they're going to ask you to pay them because they know that the buyers don't want to pay them. If you want to hold tight on not offering to pay anything to a buyer's broker, then you're probably going to reduce your pool of buyers. And in order to sell your house for the most amount of money, you don't want to reduce your pool of buyers. You want the largest pool of buyers possible. So my advice to them is offer to pay the buyer's broker. So I think we're going to end up right where we started, I think.
You have to point
I think it's primarily on people who represent buyers to, stick to your guns, man. The last purchase agreement got on a listing, the buyer's agent was asking for a 3% commission. I thought, well, that guy's pretty bold. So we didn't agree to it, but that's what they asked for. That's the way I think we're going to end up. I think we're going to end up pretty much exactly where we started. Just my opinion.
I think it all depends on the whole package of the offer of how it really plays out. But I think you have to make sure that you're explaining to your buyers up front how it can play out so that they're prepared.
Absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. But it's always, in evaluating offers, particularly multiple offers, the thing is you have to look at the whole package. The highest price isn't necessarily the best offer. There are other considerations. How credit worthy is the buyer? Is it a cash deal? Well, how soon can they close? there's a multitude of things that you need to really nail down to give your seller good advice as to which offer to work with.
Yep, yep. Leslie, you had your hand up. You had a comment?
Well, we have I will just speak from the forums committee. I'm chairing it this year. Rhonda's on it with me too. Everybody there thinks it's going away forever. So it'll just be interesting to see what happens. EXP, they won't allow their agents to do this CBCA at all. It just is right into the purchase agreement. So the concept is going to exist. I agree with Jeff that the concept exists, that you're going to have to prepare your sellers to expect to pay, because you pay one way or another if you're listing it. If you make the buyer pay all of a buyer's agent fee and they're younger and starting out, I mean, it's going to get tacked on to the price of the house. Then it's going to inflate it artificially. We've got to then sit and sweat an appraisal coming in or not coming in on the selling side. So you're paying one way or another. I think it's going to come down to what's going to become the norm on paper. And right now I am really loving not advertising, since we're not legally supposed to in a print form, that we are paying out. Now, I know every market's different, and Sarah and I in some ways are very lucky that we work with the same agents typically over and over again, and there's a trust level established. So I think that, my whole example of like 8 showings, not one person asked, they already know. I know how to explain this to my sellers. I'm not leaving buyers agents high and dry. That's ridiculous. We're all on both sides of the table often enough around here that it's just a respect to the other agent. And if I may, Sarah, she works a lot with a lot of lake stuff, and you got agents coming from the Twin Cities that want us to go do this showing for them, and then they write it up, and then they receive the 2.5 commission. So this is a super win on that front, that if we're not offering that 2.5 to the buyer's agent, then we can show it and we can collect that, or they can, get the 3-hour drive up here, sorry, to show it themselves and earn their 2.5. It was to just kind of be taken from us fairly often around here.
Okay, so I'm glad that you're on the forums committee, because I think, and Lori, you may want to jump in on this one. There's still some confusion on writing out the purchase agreements, depending on if seller's contributing or if you're asking for, your commission on the PA itself. And I think it's on line 406, where you're talking about if the seller if you're asking directly for the seller to pay, I think it's on line 406. But Lori, I think sometimes we're seeing that there is a co-op being paid out and agents are still putting dollar amounts in on line 406, getting paid directly from the seller. So
I think if I can just chime in real quick, Leslie had mentioned that EXP doesn't allow any cooperating broker compensation, and that's fine. If they don't want their agents to do that, then they just won't get paid. Because depending on what our listing contracts say, another agent cannot interfere with that contract. That's Article 16 of the Code of Ethics. So if you have a listing agreement that states that, your seller and you have agreed that you're going to be sharing your commission through cooperating compensation, and you get an offer that has whatever written on line 406, and that's how they want to get paid, well, then you cross that out, counter it at 0, offer them the cooperating compensation agreement. If they don't sign it, then they don't get paid. Because they can't interfere with that contract. And I've had this conversation many times, because if you continue to read that section of the purchase agreement, and I believe it's 405 to 408, it basically says that the seller is going to be paying directly to the buyer broker X amount. And this also includes any cooperating compensation. So if you get an offer that has 2.7 in it, and your payout, your cooperating compensation is 2.7, then guess what? They're going to be getting 2 times 2.7. So, and I've had agents ask me, well, how are they going to know? And I said, well, let's just say that that buyer's agent saw our website that said we're paying 2.7 in co-op. And they take it to court. Well, your seller attorney is going to say, why didn't your agent protect you? Because they knew what your contract said. I mean, it can happen in all different kinds of ways, but we have to remember that where our loyalties lie and what our fiduciary duties are to our clients. So
I'll give an example of that. I have a co-listing here with Wayne Schuett, and we had that happen that the CBCA said that we were paying out 2.5%. And that agent from the Twin Cities had said, didn't even ask us, and just wrote it into their purchase agreement. And it was late night negotiations and everybody signed it. And it wasn't until later that I realized we've got a CBCA and we've got the 2.5. So really that buyer's agent from the Twin Cities is getting paid 5% right now. And I told Wayne there was a lot of people involved between the sellers and marital, it was a lot. And I just said, just get it signed and we'll clean it up tomorrow. So we did. Sorry, Lori Cunningham, you probably don't want to hear that. So we did. The next day I just told him, I pulled up my phone here. I'm going to read to you what I said. And again, this isn't perfect, but I'm just telling you from a realistic standpoint. So I said, one more signature. Here's the easiest way to explain it. We have a 2.5 payout to the buyer's agent on our listing contract. They put 2.5 in the purchase agreement. So we just need to void one so that they don't get paid double. Just sent it out for your signature. It's nothing new, but I just wanted to give you the short, simple explanation. And said, call me if you want to discuss it further. So sometimes people, I don't know if that's, that was like the shortest, simplest way, because a lot of times these people are like, holy cow, just at the end of the day, how much am I getting? How much am I paying out? Right. And so that was the way that I explained it to her. We sent it out and I can't remember which one we voided, but and that agent in the Twin Cities understood too. I just explained it to him. So that's another thing, is remembering to have grace with other agents that are going through this. We're all trying to get through it. And I know, agents from other brokerages, like right last fall, had called, and as we were discussing it, one of them was like, how are you guys handling this? So it's been kind of interesting, but there's your real life example there, that we did it. We were paying, technically we were paying him double. We were paying him out at 5%, and we just got it avoided and cleaned up.
When I think that there are some agents for some reason still don't quite understand it. So, to me, I think it's simple. Like, you call that listing agent. Is there compensation being offered? Yep. Okay. Send me the form, even just a quick picture of it, so that I know. I mean, and it kind of goes with, I don't remember if it was Leslie or Sarah said it, like, it's a trust factor. I mean, we're all in this together, and you start burning people and saying there is commission and then there's really not, like, that's not going to go well for you at all. But I'll have people that will call me and say, is there compensation? Yep. Okay. It's 8:00 at night. I'm still showing houses. My assistant's gone. I'm like, there is, I just don't have access to that form right now. And they'll still write it in the offer. I'm like, I just told you there was, So then I gotta call them. Okay, so are you asking for an additional 2.5, or are you good with what we're paying? Well, no, I just wanted to make sure. I'm like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
But that's kind of, I mean, like, if I'm in the office, that's fine. If Sophie's in the office, that's fine. We get it to them right away. But if it's 8:00 at night and I'm not at my home office and Sophie's gone, it's like, you're just going to have to trust me, and I trust other people. I'll text them and say, hey, is there compensation? I just don't know why agents don't get it. Like,
Right.
if we say yes, there's compensation, you don't write it in. If we say no, there's not, then you write it in. And I'm not quite sure why we're all still on the struggle bus, but I do make a point, like, that's like an extra thing that I always look at, just to make sure. Like, and then I would just ask the agent, are you really asking for additional or what? And sometimes they are. Sometimes they'll put 1% in there. They didn't like the 2%, and they'll put 1 in, or a 0.5 or whatever. So
I'll tell you the way I handle it. I just, when they ask me, are you offering compensation? I say, well, we have some understanding with the seller. And if you want the seller to pay part of your commission, pay your commission, put it in in the purchase agreement. So I don't provide any information, written or otherwise, to the selling agent other than to say, put it in the purchase agreement.
Even if your listing agreement says they'll pay out 2% or 2.5%?
Well, my listing agreement says I'm getting 6%, and I will, if the seller pays anything directly to the buyer's broker, my commission will be reduced by whatever is paid up to 2.7%.
Jeff, you have to be really careful when you do that because our listing contract does not give us permission to advertise that. Unless
I
you
don't
have it in
advertise
writing.
it. I don't
But
advertise it.
by saying put it in the purchase agreement, you're saying that your seller might be willing to pay that, and we don't have that in writing. So be very careful about that. We can offer our cooperating compensation because it's our money to share. But by stating that just write it in the purchase agreement means that your seller might pay that, and we don't have that permission on the contract.
Okay.
So just so for my clarity, when I don't, what page it's on, 2 or whatever, what says compensation, do you put 6% there?
Yes.
And then on the following pages, it says percentage paid out to a buyer that's or an agent representing a buyer, or an agent that's facilitating with a buyer. What do you put in there?
I'd have to go look, pull one out. But my basic understanding is I'm gonna list it at 6%, and I'm gonna agree to pay up to 2.7% to the selling broker. And
So are you deciding that, or are you letting the seller
well,
decide?
I'm telling the seller that we're in the system where we've abandoned the old way of doing things. We have a new way of doing things, and that if normally in the past we determined how much we were going to pay to the selling broker. I said now this whatever gets paid to the whatever gets paid to this, if in other words, you're going to agree to pay me 6%. If you don't pay the selling broker, then I will pay the selling broker whatever the selling broker works out with me. But if you agree to pay the selling broker directly, then the amount that you're going to pay me will be reduced by whatever you pay the selling broker up to 2.7%. And I've got another little thing that I'm uncertain as to how this is going to work out in the long run. But one of my concerns has been, how is this going to affect the appraisal industry? Normally MLS listing, if there is a seller's concession, the seller's concession is included in the information on the closed listing. It's not quite clear to me how this is going to be done to cover whatever gets paid to the selling broker. Because if the selling broker isn't being paid at all, I would expect the buyer to be buying at a lower purchase price. But if you're an appraiser and you don't know what's going on that end, how does that affect your evaluation of that comp in terms of ongoing listings? I don't know that that's been sorted out. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah, it's that there's so many issues, there's so many questions that we don't know all the answers to. I know we've only got like 5 minutes left in this, so my question.
It seems to me that this whole schmucklo we're going through is going to have a chilling effect on appraisals. That we might see more appraisals coming in low because the price is lower because the seller's paying the buyer is paying the buyer's broker, because that could drop down your, depending upon the purchase price, it'll take a couple, 2% off the purchase price. So that price might be at least 2% lower. I just don't know how appraisers are going to sort that out.
Yeah, well, good. Thank goodness we're not appraisers, so we'll have to let them figure that one out. But in the last couple of minutes here, so how do we think that the NAR Commission settlement long term, how's it going to affect our industry? I mean, is buyer representation going to start going away? So what are the long term effects of the agreement? Which way is it going to go?
So I know we only have a couple minutes left, and there's like lots of back and forth on everything. I'll say two things, and one of that's touching on there. Number one is I hear that a lot of us started right after the settlement in August, started with that CBCA, and it sounds like more of us are going to saying, hey, just write it in the purchase agreement. It's kind of a trend that I'm seeing with a lot of agents. So that's number one. And number two is I think this summer is going to be very interesting. I know for at least my market, this summer is going to be interesting to see how that is handled. Not so much on the starter homes, the $250,000 homes, but I'm really curious to see how it's going to play out in some of these lake homes that are up, 800 to $1 million. You get an offer in full price at an 800, and they're asking for the buyer's agent at 1%. And you've got another full price up against it, and they're asking for 2.5. How that's going to play out. Our net sheets are obviously net sheets are going to be really important when you're comparing in multiple offer situations. But so maybe not so much long term, but I'm really curious how this was going to be our first full spring market and summer, since this settlement. And so I'm just kind of seeing how it's going to play out there.
Yeah, Leslie.
I had a real life example. I had a listing, put it up on Thursday, had 2 offers by Friday. One of them was written with my client. The person who we were competing with, different brokerage, he made no inquiry as to whether or not I was writing an offer on behalf of a client. And that is a disclosable item to him if he should ask, and he really should have. We're going to have to be, my takeaway from that is that he then inflated the asking price to a really high point to cover the 2.5% that he wrote into the purchase agreement. And that didn't make him win, even though his offer was more dollars. I explained very thoroughly to my sellers what this means. Now we're on the hook for this appraisal to come in at this inflated price. There's no comp that bears it out, frankly. It's a unique situation, and he did a real disservice to his own buyer by not inquiring to see at least if I was writing an offer, because then he could probably have made some assumptions that the commission structure would be a little different if I was writing the offer. You've got to be, if you're going to be representing buyers, I think it's a really good opportunity to show your worth and to show that these little intricate, maybe not meaningful things become incredibly meaningful, and not, if you're not asking the right questions as a buyer's agent going into something that is a multiple offer, that person lost, had no idea. I don't know if the agent even cared, but they offered 10,000 more and they didn't get it because of the way he structured it.
Wow. Yeah. Candy, any last thoughts before we close out?
I'm kind of with Sarah. I think we're going to eventually I'm just finding more and more people are going away from offering the compensation. So I do think that's going to change buyers' borrowing power, though, because if you're a new buyer and you didn't know differently, probably okay. But if you've bought houses many times over the years, you're probably going to be like, oh, I didn't know I need an additional, $3,000 to $7,000 to buy a house. Yeah. And I do think appraisals, I don't know how it's gonna, I always tell everybody, I'm not an appraisal. It's an appraiser. It's not for me to decide if it's gonna appraise or not. I mean, you can do what Leslie said, and, comps don't necessarily support that higher price, but again, we're not appraisers at the end of the day. So I do think that will be a little bit challenging, but maybe lenders can, I don't know, maybe there's something lenders can do for closing costs or something. I don't know. I don't know how that's gonna play out.
Well, are you agents doing anything with appraisal gaps on Leslie, in a situation like yours where they're so much higher? Is that buyer guaranteeing that they'll give enough cash to make that difference?
Another reason that it's important to have the right buyer agent to explain that, make sure a client might be very comfortable with it. I mean, we all know it gets really emotional and, I got to get this, whatever it is. And, if you go through and say, hey, sometimes it's the smaller things that are going to get you this property and make you the most desirable. That's the most important thing, I think, is explaining so they understand. And I have, as you can imagine, a multitude of opinions on appraisers and the luck of the draw with that. So as long as they're feeling settled, maybe you're showing them some comps on this house they're buying just to make them feel settled as a buyer going in. I mean, I bring my laptop everywhere and just whip it up and show this is what's happening right now. This is what's going on. And that settles people if they want to feel comfortable, because it certainly helps. If you're on the listing side, those things are wonderful to receive.
Yeah. Appraisal gaps are, I had one the other day where I had the listing side and I said, well, we can ask them to pay for, if we feel the price is too high, we're not sure about the appraising or not. I said we could do an appraisal gap. And so we brought that back to the selling agent and she just said, we are already taking care of the commission and all these other things. Like, no, we're not doing an appraisal gap also. I'm like, well, okay, just want to make sure we understand. So.
Okay. Well, I think these are topics that we could go on for another hour or so, but I'm trying to be considerate of everyone's time, and we have exceeded our time. But I just wanted to thank all of you for being here today and sharing your wisdom and your thoughts. It really, like I said before, we all learn more from each other than we do from any other source. So I just thank you all so much for being here today, and don't be surprised if we call you back again.
Well, I get an invite back.
Everybody should go out and sell something today.
Yeah, go sell something today. Make a good day out of it.
Yes,
But-
I
please.
get to go spend my day with a bunch of seniors at the senior expo.
I'll sell. One of them's got to have a house to sell.
I usually do get one or two clients from it. So yes.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks everyone for being here. I guess we're going to log off now, but I can't thank you enough for your time today.
Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
thanks,
much,
everyone.
everybody. Have a good day.
All right.
See ya.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.